was just getting a little language and Hungarian pronunciation. So, a little lesson there. I'd like to thank Sue and Lisa and Dawn for all they brought this morning for the service, and their direct experience and their creativity and their thoughtfulness. And Linda Coulson, who has been stepping back from the worship associate role for a while as she's awaiting her next knee surgery. So she's just liked the first one so much, she's done the second one. But she came forward because Ken Ewan was scheduled for today, and Ken is still recovering from his recent hospitalization. So thank you to everybody and the choir ensemble. Beautiful. It often takes people by surprise to learn how deeply our Unitarian Universalist faith tradition is rooted in the entire history of Christianity from the very beginnings. Just as it sometimes takes me by surprise when I found out they've assumed this is a New Age religion that someone dreamed up in the 1970s, probably while smoking an illicit substance. After all, an online search will reveal several sources attesting that we Unitarians are a cult, and our own Unitarian Universalist website proudly claims the title of heretic as part of our core identity. No wonder people are confused by our rational, open-minded, rather unusual way of faithful religion. The term heretic derives from a word in the Greek language, heresis, meaning to choose. And claiming the right to choose is a characteristic deeply rooted in our human nature, emerging in every generation back through time. Heresy is the imperative some people feel to challenge the doctrines that have been handed down by the authorities, to seek their own truth and decide for themselves what they most truly and faithfully believe. The earliest Unitarian and Universalist heretics were those who refused to go along with the emerging theological doctrines as they were established by the church hierarchy. The core of our heresy is encoded in the fourth Unitarian Universalist principle, affirming our right and responsibility to conduct a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Those who create and promote theological dogma are not fond of heretics, as a rule, since a heresy challenges the authority of those in power. As a segment of the UUA website informs us, during the first 3 centuries of the Christian Church, believers could choose from a variety of interpretations of the teachings of Jesus. Christianity lost its element of choice in the year 325 of the Common Era, when the Nicene Creed established the Trinity as dogma, and a couple of centuries later when the theology of damnation was coded in a church doctrine. For centuries thereafter, people who professed Unitarian, one God, or Universalist, universal salvation beliefs, those beliefs that rejected the doctrine of the Trinity or damnation, were persecuted, end quote. But there was an exception to that rule, a bright spot of religious tolerance in the small kingdom of Transylvania, beginning in the mid-1500s in what is now in the nation of Romania. It is a long and complicated history, and I don't have time to share that entire story with you today, but I have spoken it before from various pulpits, so I'll post a more complete history along with this sermon and Lisa's reflection, I hope, on the UUCCH website on our sermons page. So the history, the short version. Transylvanian King John Sigismund grew up influenced by free-thinking, humanistic, and anti-Trinitarian views of theologian David Berench. He created public discussions in this liberal theology, and then in January 1568, at the Diet of Torda, Sigismund took the unprecedented step of proclaiming freedom of religion and conscience as follows, quote, "Every order shall preach the gospel by his own personal conception, at any place if that community is willing to accept him, or if it isn't, no one should force him just because their soul is not satisfied with him. But a community can keep such a preacher whose teachings are delightful. And no one may hurt a preacher. No one may be blamed because of their religion. No one is allowed to threaten others with prison or divest anyone of their office because of their profession, because faith is God's gift, born from hearing, and this hearing is conceived by the word of God. End quote. That is the heritage that we call our own, this heritage of free religion. This declaration was unparalleled in Europe at that time. It constituted official state recognition of Unitarianism and was the foundation of the Unitarian Church. These anti-Trinitarian and universalist theological views had existed within the Christian world for 12 centuries, but after the edict in Transylvania, the first Unitarian churches were formed, and Unitarianism became a reality in the religious landscape. The first Unitarian hymn book was published in 1570, and in those years, many foreign liberal thinkers and anti-Trinitarian theologians found refuge in Transylvania as the only European nation that guaranteed religious freedom, the freedom of all to believe and to preach what their conscience dictated, and not to harm those who believe differently. Heresy at last had found a home. The rulers who followed King John Sigismund, although they did not overturn his decree of religious freedom, placed constraints on its interpretation as they tried to reinstitute the dominance of the Catholic Church. There was censorship of religious writings and then a law that forbade any further innovation in theology, freezing the teachings as they were at the time of the Diet of Torda. In the year 1579, David Ferenc was tried and found guilty of violating that law of innovation, and he was sentenced as a religious reformer to life imprisonment in the fortress of Deva, where he later died. Liberal theologic innovation was a high-risk enterprise in those days. Perhaps it is in all times, really. A new wave of active repression of liberal religious thought throughout Europe began in the late 1630s and lasted until the end of the 18th century. But the Unitarians in Transylvania were resilient and resourceful. They created a center for theological education and a Unitarian printing house. Those institutions lasted about 20 years until the Catholic Church began to confiscate all Protestant holdings, including from the institutions established by the Unitarians. The repeated waves of religious and political oppression prompted Unitarians to even greater solidarity and generosity, taking defensive measures to assure the survival of their church. Books were written and somehow published, and worship services moved into private homes when they couldn't be conducted in churches. The Unitarian Church in Transylvania experienced a period of renewal in the 1780s under Holy Roman Emperor Joseph II's new Edict of Toleration, along with generous bequests by supporters that enabled churches, colleges, and libraries to be built and rebuilt over the years. In the 1800s, the Church initiated ties with Unitarians in England and the United States to help sustain their historic presence in Transylvania. And in 1900, the Unitarian Church in Transylvania was a co-founder of the International Association for Religious Freedom, a world organization of Unitarians and other religions that continues today. One source of the oppressive environment in Transylvania is that the Unitarian population there is ethnically Hungarian and a Romanian nation. Romania and Hungary have been at war on and off throughout the centuries, and control of Transylvania has been a prize in successive conquests. Transylvania was part of Hungary from 1690 until 1920, when it became part of Romania in the agreements that ended World War I. The Partner Church Program was formally established in 1969 to formally promote relationships between Unitarian churches in Transylvania and those in the US and England. Those relationships have been a lifeline for the Unitarian churches in Transylvania as the oppression has continued. Religious repression was the policy under communist rule in Romania from 1947 to 1989, including the dictatorship of Nicolae Ceausescu from 1965 to 1989. The ethnically Hungarian population in Romania was especially targeted, including the Unitarian churches in Transylvania, because their heritage and membership were in the Hungarian tradition. In 1989, communist rule came to an end and the forcibly confiscated church property began to be restored, very slowly, and the process is still not complete. Even under economic development and democratic governance, Romania still faces issues related to infrastructure, medical services, education, and corruption, along with a high rate of out-migration of all the young people, which is a threat to the country's future. This church's relationship with the Unitarian Church in Szekeyderzs began in 1992, led by then Minister Reverend Rudy Nemser, and a covenant was created between our two congregations to seal the partnership. Szekeyderzs is an isolated traditional farming village, you heard about it from Sue, and Unitarians there worship in an ancient fortress church built in the 1300s, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. UCCH partnership takes various forms. We have supported the congregation financially. Members and ministers have made spiritual and historic journeys to these historic sites in the Unitarian tradition. And in 2010, we hosted a visit from their minister, Sandor, and his wife, Katja, who is a pastor of a neighboring church. Our Transylvanian church partnership is funded by individual donations and by events like next Saturday night's delicious Hungarian dinner. I got to eat some of Sue's Hungarian food. What was that? Some potluck earlier this year, and I thought, yes, I'm going to that dinner. So that'll support the church's mission for children and health and the aged in Szekeyderzs. Our financial contributions to the Partner Church program are a vital source of support for these historic congregations. But I think even more important is our recognition that without the theological influence and the intrepid religious innovation of David Verich, without the enlightened lawmaking of John Szymond, without the courage and faithfulness of countless individuals and congregations 4,000 miles from here, liberal religion as we know it today might not even exist. Innovation needs a safe place to grow, and heresy needs a home. What is a religion worth? What is a church worth? Why should anyone participate in and support the institutional church? Why would someone risk a life sentence, a death sentence, for their freedom of belief, the imperative continuing to seek the truth, wherever that search might lead? I don't think I can say it any better than the words that David Verich carved on the wall of his prison cell, and I quote, "Neither the sword of popes, nor the cross, nor the image of death, nothing will halt the march of truth." And so I say with our Transylvania partners, East and Edge, God is one. As we join in the spirit of unity, sharing our free and responsible search for truth and meaning, bringing ever more freedom, love, and justice to the world. I invite you